On the air.
From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Wednesday, January the 20th, the year of our Lord, 2016. And now, here they are, with a little frost on their mustache, Jim and Rich.
Oh, man, I'm telling you.
You must have thought, man, you don't even have a mustache.
I don't have a mustache.
Jim,
you're the guy with the frost.
I guess so. I thought.
But I think there's a double meaning to that, Jim. I think he's trying to.
I think John is talking dirty again.
He's actually. I think he's saying, that your mustache is gray, and mine would be too if I had one. So.
And he should talk.
Yeah. You should be talking, DeVita.
You should be talking there, DeVita. Well, here we are once again, two guys in search of something to talk about. Managed to kill an hour trying to do that.
Yeah, Jim, I just got done reading everything I've ever read about Bill Veeck has been excellent. Whoever has written it.
Or his own books, too.
Or his own books. And just got done reading one by Paul Dixon.
I read that one.
And, I had tears in my eyes at the end. You just don't want Bill. I mean, you don't want Bill to go.
No.
I mean, the man loved life.
He did, and he had a great life, a great family. Mary Frances is still alive, I believe. She's in her late 90s.
Wow, man.
And lives down in Hyde Park in a nursing home. The last time I saw her, a senior home.
Okay.
In fact, the last thing I read about her a few years back was she was taking some books. God knows there were enough books around that place with
that's for sure.
With her husband, and a lot of them she was taking to a used bookstore in Hyde Park, and they were autographed copies by the author.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember reading in most of his biographies, his father, for Christmas and other birthdays and whatnot, would get him whole sets of different authors.
Yeah.
And he would. So he was very well read.
Yeah,
I would say.
I think he said by the time he was out of his teens, he had read all the classics.
The classics, yeah. I would say this politically. I doubt if I would have agreed with Bill Veeck on much of anything, but
I think he was very liberal.
A great, lovely man. So
yeah, I always thought his comment about when he sold the White Sox and would go to Wrigley Field to watch the Cubs and would sit in the bleachers.
Yes.
And somebody asked him, "Why are you always in the bleachers? Why don't you just call him up and get a seat down in the boxes?" And he said, "Oh, no." He said, "The view is better, the beer is colder, and the fans are much more intelligent."
Yeah, I just got done reading that very quote.
Yeah.
And you're almost, I would say you're almost right on the money, almost word for word with the quote.
I think that, I remember that one. I always liked that.
Jim, before we went on the air, we were talking a little bit about Chet Kopic, and you had mentioned he was on wrestling a little bit. I don't remember what.
Yeah, he's been. I think Chet's watching his Facebook posts lately. He's been reminiscing about some things.
Reminiscing, okay.
And he had a picture when and you knew that from your days working over at the Rosemisen of wrestling shows, and he would be the ring announcer for the WWE shows, and he had a picture. There was a picture of him in the ring making an announcement, and Andre the Giant was in the corner. And he made a comment that it was something like, Andre the Giant, a wonderful man, didn't like being a part of this, didn't like being a sideshow. He said, and I sat there and listened to him one night as he consumed 65 cans of beer.
Well, I could easily believe that, because when when there was a friend of mine. We got to be friends when she was a bartender at the Ground Round, Joyce. And I don't know if I ever knew Joyce's last name, but she ended up owning a place called Joyce's Cockpit Lounge in the Air Host Motel on Manheim Road, south of Irving. And before the wrestlers really hit it big money-wise back in the 80s when Vince McMahon started to go big time, they used to stay at the Air Host, so we used to see them. Now, I never saw Andre personally, but he would stay there. And the two things I would say, and to go along with your story about the 65 cans of beer consumed, I guess one day he had so much that he passed out on the floor there at the cockpit. Well, they couldn't move him.
They couldn't move him.
He had to stay there the whole night. The other story, though, was Joyce was a very pretty lady, but she was a bigger girl, a plus-size girl, if you want to put it this way. And Andre had his eye on her. So one night they're there drinking, and they closed Joyce's, but they were going to continue on. And Rog's Turtle Inn, which at that time was on Irving and 25th, was I think maybe a
Probably
5 o'clock license,
4 or 5
something.
o'clock joint.
So they were gonna go over there, and everybody was getting in cars and whatnot. And so Andre sort of hung around because he wanted to drive over there with Joyce. Well, he didn't know that she had a vet. So there's no way that Andre was fitting in the vet. So Joyce had to go over in the vet, and they had to get the motel van to take him over. So big man. Do you remember, Jim, when we would have been probably teenagers or maybe grade school kids when he appeared in Sports Illustrated?
Yeah.
It might have been on the cover even.
Yeah.
But they had a picture of Andre, and John, I don't know if you ever saw this, but this man was so big. He had a beer can in his hand, and if this was his hand, the beer can was like, okay, and I know people can't see, but I'm holding my fingers against my one hand. It looked like about an inch worth of, what I'm holding. It didn't even, he could have held it in his whole hand and not had any of the can showing. That's how big this man was.
A lot of people say one of the most impressive things in wrestling was Hulk Hogan picking him up and body slamming him.
Yeah, that
in,
was
in what was would that have been the first WrestleMania?
I'm not sure if it was the first. That was the big one though in
was
Detroit.
In Detroit, yeah.
And that was not the first. The first one was at Madison Square Garden.
No, you know what? It was like the third.
Yeah,
maybe.
probably was third, and it might have been. I want to say that they set
there was an attendance
record for attendance for a wrestling match. So
yeah, like 96,000 or
it was
something like
huge.
that.
Very big.
In the Silverdome, which sits tattered and falling apart up there in Pontiac right now. And the roof is gone, and I think they're trying to figure out how to tear it down.
Wow.
Yeah. Another wrestling thought that came to mind. Iron Mike Sharp died.
Oh, Iron Mike Sharp.
Yeah, I know you could.
You
You are the angel of death. When I get a text, invariably somebody dies.
I'm the angel of death. I bet you're probably out
trying
angeling me about 3-1 here these days.
Lately, I've been trying to do my best to catch up. I let you know about David Bowie and Glenn Fry yesterday.
I want to say, I know. I was fooling around on the internet one day, and I don't know if you were following wrestling at this point in time, but there was a tag team called the Powers of Pain, which I was always interested in because when I traveled for a living, one of my I had the northern part of Iowa was in my territory, everything north of I-80. So one of my stops, one of the places I stayed over would be Waterloo, Iowa, because it was a fairly large town, and you could go someplace to eat and have it at least be decent. And there was a huge football player there, and his name first name Paul, last name is a Polish name which I never can get, but he was one of the Powers of Pain. And I would read about him and his football exploits, in the local Waterloo paper, so I was aware of him. And then he got into professional wrestling, so I followed him a little bit. But when the Powers of Pain made their debut in the WWF, the team the guys they wrestled, I can't remember who his partner was, but it was Iron Mike Sharp was the they were the fall guys for the
Okay.
Powers of Pain.
Okay.
And but I actually, when Mike Sharp started with the WWF, and one of the interesting things about wrestling, I know a lot of people poo-poo wrestling, but it is a very interesting business. Vince McMahon and I think it was Gene Okerlund, used to have a show, and it was like a talk show. It was sort of set up like the Tonight Show. And so that was their opportunity maybe to feature,
that. Yeah.
They'd feature new wrestlers that were, they were going to employ. And when Iron Mike Sharp started in the WWF, it looked like he was going to be maybe a feature attraction. But what happens is, and I could name 3 or 4 guys that this happened to, and the names probably wouldn't mean anything to anybody, so I won't even name them. But these guys go out and they start to wrestle, and they'll feature them. But then what they try to do, at least the way I see it, is get an idea of how the fans are reacting to them. And a good reaction is if they really love you as a good guy, or if they really hate you as a bad guy. But if you fall somewhere in between, now you've fallen through the cracks. So you really either got to be hated or loved, and then
there's nothing in between.
And there's really not much in between, except for you may rustle out your contract, but you'll be gone after that.
Yeah.
And Iron Mike Sharp was in that category. They featured him to begin with. He didn't catch on with the fans, and then he just wrestled out as a contract as a I don't know what you would say, almost like a jobber, I think is what they would refer him to.
Mm-hmm.
And at the point when he was in the ring with the Powers of Pain, he was finishing out his contract. He was a jobber. He was there to lose, obviously, and that's what they did as artfully as possible.
Like when Scrap Iron George Gdansky used to do that.
Well, yeah, yes.
When he
but
wasn't,
that was his job always.
When he wasn't refereeing a match.
Right. Well, there's the other thing.
Yeah.
I remember a buddy of mine, Kevin, and I went to see. It might have been one of Bob Luce's last productions. He got back in the game when wrestling took off in the '80s, and he had a production at the Odeum in Villa Park, and we went. And he had some good guys. He had Razor Ramon when he was still Scott Hall was on the card. Mm-hmm. He had Marty Jannetty, who used to be tag team partners with Shawn Michaels, and he had some decent guys on the card. Because Luce always put on a good card. He just in this case he had money was the object. It didn't last long, but we're sitting next to a kid. Young black kid, I'm talking about a 9 or 10-year-old kid, and we're talking to him. And on the card, there was a guy, and I think he wrestled a little bit for Vern Gagne in AWA. His name was Earthquake Ferris. And we're sitting next to the little kid, and he goes, "Hey, that's the guy who helps my dad put up the ring before the show." He's on the card, right? And I'm like, well, you know what? These wrestlers are versatile. I mean, hey, when you're just starting in the business, you do a little bit of it, or you may be called on to do anything.
Yeah, I always remember, and it was like a Thanksgiving weekend, and I was at the whatever it is now, but it was the Chicago Health Club over on Cumberland, and there were some guys in there that were wrestlers,
mm-hmm.
and. There was one guy, I can't even remember his name, but I recognized him. I saw him there. And there were 2 other guys, and I knew one of them, and one of them was one of Demolition.
Okay.
And I said, I know you're part of Demolition. I don't remember if you're Axe or Smash. And he told me, well, whatever it was. He says, well, I'm Axe. I said, oh. I said, nice to meet you. I said, it says, geez, I said, last night you had the Thanksgiving show in Connecticut, and now you're here. I said, geez, not much of a chance to rest. And he said, well, you know what? He said, this is an organization that treats you well.
Mm-hmm.
He said we had a good, we had nice accommodations. We got here, good flight. Have facilities to work out. He says it's not like some organizations where you got to spend all night to drive from Jockstrap, Missouri to Crotch Rod, Arkansas.
A lot of those promotions are exactly like that.
There's still these small wrestling organizations that wrestling things that out at the Odeum. You know,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they still do it.
Well, I remember years ago, the guy wrote for the Sun Times, but he wasn't always in the Sun Times, and he would write different. Everything I ever read by him, or any time I heard him on the radio, he was really interesting. A guy by the name of Lon Gronke was a very,
Yeah, I remember that name.
very up on the world of wrestling. So one night I have the WGN on, and it's like midnight, so it's the midnight show. I don't know who the host was, but he's got Granke on, and they're talking about pro wrestling. And he said, these guys really work hard. And the guy says, really? He says, sometimes they're only in the ring for 5 minutes. What are you talking about? He said, well, Hulk Hogan, who was the, king of wrestling at the time, he said, a Sunday for him could start out in New York with a television taping, fly to Chicago for a Sunday afternoon matinee, so wrestle on that card, get on another plane and fly to L.A., and then wrestle in an evening match on the coast. So he spanned all 3 time zones, wrestled 3 times during the day in 3 different major cities, and he said, that's a lot. It's a lot of travel. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You got to get. You're trying to. You got to. How would you say it? You have to get over, if that's the right term, with each of the crowds you're in front of. You can't give a subpar performance. They're not expecting that. And I said, wow, that is. These guys do work a lot, and they work hard.
They do, and I think I read in somebody's book, and I can't remember what it was, which one it was, if it was Steve Austin or one of the others, talking about how much they put in prior to that on their moves, their rehearsals.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, friends, they do rehearse. It's staged.
Sure.
And even at the point where before, talking about one, he was talking about one match, and I can't even remember who he was wrestling, saying, hey, listen, and standing in the back before they were being introduced, he says, hey, listen, why don't we try this instead?
Mm-hmm.
You do this and I'll counter with that. Oh, okay, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. That might be better.
Now, it's really almost like the ultimate in teamwork, because if you're not trusting the other guy to do what he's supposed to do correctly, you can get hurt.
Oh, and you still, even if you do it right,
you still get hurt.
You still can get hurt. You still can fall the wrong way.
Yes.
Something happens.
There was a guy, and he was never a headliner, but I used to see him on the TV shows, because he was always a guy that they put in to lose. And Oriental guy, Ricky Ataki.
I remember that name, too.
This guy used to take the best, I'd put it this way, the best beating you could possibly take. I remember one time he was in with a partner, and they were the Road Warriors. So, this is like a slaughter. But, they'd throw him off the rope, and he'd come, and they'd, hit him with a clothesline. And, go through the air, like crash. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's all prearranged. But still, this guy's got to get literally, he's probably at least 4 feet in the air, because you got to give the illusion of the clothesline. So his body is, parallel with the mat.
Yeah.
And then you fall, and you're falling right here on the back of your shoulders and your neck. And I'm like, and you gotta make a noise so that it seems like, hey, something's happening. I go, I don't care if it's rehearsed or not. You're taking that fall, that isn't easy.
You're still taking a fall, and you used to see a lot of them when they do this stuff and land. You'd see before the body hit, the legs would be bent and the feet would come down.
Right,
which would take a lot of
that
absorb
takes a lot of
the shock,
hit.
and it takes a lot of the hit and makes a lot of the noise. But these guys would still fall the wrong way and still get hurt.
Yeah. I'm glad you got off on this subject. The last thing I would say, when you talked about running into the guy from Demolition at the health club, my wife's daughter, her oldest daughter Janine, worked at the old Dappers as a waitress, and she told me, she said Lex Luger came in there a few times. She goes, you would not believe what this guy would eat. Say if you and I go in and we have a a Reuben sandwich. This guy would order 3 of them. Sit down, 3 Reubens, 3 orders of fries, and but the thing was, I mean, those guys worked out so hard, and obviously a lot of them were enhanced by steroids. We know that, but still, the fact that they worked out as hard as they did, it burned those calories right off. So,
although it was another one that I ran into over at the health club one time, there was Ric Flair, and he was just talking to one of the managers, having a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like Ric Flair.
Yeah,
Yeah, because a lot of his game was talking. Definitely.
And just a nice guy.
Yeah, I'm sure he was.
Just a nice guy. Just a very friendly and cordial.
There was a guy, Jim, that when I would see Ric Flair, I always got the feeling you got your money's worth. Whether he was in the ring with a guy that was not a main headliner like he was. If he was in a TV match with just a jobber, the one thing you would see, he would always give that guy his minute of glory, where he got to beat up on Ric Flair for a while. Until of course,
the magic recovery.
But I don't know how many people realize this, but Ric Flair actually survived the plane crash early in his career.
I think I remember hearing that story.
And I always felt that maybe that was the impetus for him to, after you see your life pass before you, you survive a plane crash, you say to yourself, I'm going to go all out then, whatever I do, because I think at that point you realize how thin the thread of life actually is. And, every time you saw Ric Flair in anything, I mean, he was giving his all for the show. Mm-hmm. You never got a bad performance out of Ric Flair.
No, never did.
Yeah.
And it was always, and I remember looking at the YouTube videos, and there's a couple of them out there with when Rick retired, and how he had announced his retirement, and they said, "No, you're not leaving yet. We have some people who want to offer their tributes to him." One came out after another. Mm-hmm. And Flair was in tears by the time it was all done.
Oh man, there's many people throughout his career.
Yeah,
a lot of good people.
Yeah, okay. Well,
go ahead.
Since we're reminiscing, I mean, geez, can we stop all these classic rockers that are seem to be dying lately?
Man, you know what I noticed, Jim? Do you realize? I don't know if we talked about this on the basketball game. I think we did mention it, but. Not the boys' game that we did Friday, but the previous game we did, whatever. I think it was a girls' game.
It was a girls' game, yeah.
You were talking about Mott the Hoople.
Yeah.
And I think you were talking about maybe David Bowie in relation to that. And at that point in time, neither of us knew. I didn't know that David Bowie was sick. And next thing you knew, a week later, he was dead.
2 days. We talked about it because it happened to be his birthday that day. It was Elvis's birthday and David Bowie's birthday.
That's the reason that he came up.
Right.
And I noticed the same thing you're referring to now. That I see Mott the Hoople's drummer.
Yeah.
Passed away.
Yeah. Dale Griffin rather. Mm-hmm. And he also played with David Bowie, and it's kind of sad here because I look at this and David Griffin was 67 years old. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a decade ago.
Oh, wow.
And then hearing the news yesterday about one of the founding members of the Eagles, Glenn Frey, dying, and the heartfelt things that were posted on that, and I had to laugh because the Eagles, when they got back together, were a bunch of guys who couldn't stand each other.
Really?
Yeah. And they came out on stage, and I saw them at the Allstate Arena, and they began the thing by saying, and Fry said, "How many here are college students?" And just only a few hands, few people applauded, and he said, he made the comment. He said, Just imagine your parents had 4 cool friends, and we're them. And everybody was kind of like, okay. And he said, we want to welcome you to Reunion 1. He said, at intermission, we'll check with our managers and see if we've made enough money to go on with the second half of the show in Reunion 2. And it got to the point, too, where he said, okay, we're going to do something from our new album. It's time for all of you to go out and get a beer because we know you're not interested in it.
You just made me think. Sunday,
and it was the most expensive ticket I've ever spent on a concert.
Last Thursday, Jim, was Jim Matthews' birthday. So I took him out for a drink, and it ended up to be more than one drink over at Lasers. In fact, it ended up to be 2:30 in the morning. And then he accused me the next day of being the devil from hell. But, I mean, he could have walked out any time he wanted. But at any rate, you know Jim is a motor mouth. Billy Griffin and Jimmy Cusack, who are both neighborhood guys, are in there, and they're regularly in there. So Jim says to them, Rich has got a radio show, right? So now I'm in there again on Sunday. And Billy says, Jimmy says to me, he goes, Billy's going to call your radio show on Tuesday. I go, no, he's not, Jim. We don't do calls. He goes, you don't do calls. But Billy, we were going to have a caller today. But
if the phone rings, John.
If the phone rings, don't answer, John. But no, Billy was, he wanted to get on and talk. But
one of these days we got to do a phone.
Yeah.
We got to take phone calls. One of these days, we'll see if anybody actually even wants to talk to us.
Yeah, that would have been hilarious. The phone, and so if the phone rings,
John, don't answer.
Don't answer, please. Jim, you know what? Now we got off on this tangent, which is great. But you had told me a couple days ago that you were at that point, and maybe you've other thoughts obviously have come to you since then. But you sort of wanted to talk about the Bulls a little bit. I thought.
Well, I think the other day when everybody was saying, "Geez, they got to cut maybe they can cut a deal and get Noah out of here, and he's going to be a free agent. Maybe they can do it. Somebody will pick it up, and it'll just be a salary cap dump, and then that took care of him."
Yeah, the injury dead. I think weren't we texting back and forth where my thought is, and it's not a knock on Joakim Noah, I don't think that his trade value would have been any more healthy than it would have been injured, because
it's probably more value now that he's injured.
He's the type of guy that I think only a contending team would probably need, and you're not going to get even if you get a draft choice or something from a contending team, it's not going to be a high one, obviously. No. So I mean, he would. I think not
a high one. It's either going to be one or two.
Yeah. The papers talk about that Noah was going to be moved and this. And I'm thinking, but who are they going to move him for? What's his trade going to be like? I agree with you that what it would amount to would just be a salary dump.
It really would be a salary dump, and I think the issue that they're going to have to deal with this ball club is they're going to have to find Fred Hoiberg players.
Yeah, they are, and
they don't have them now.
Well, there's sort of a tone, and I'm not a big Joe Cowley fan, as you know.
Yeah.
But there's sort of a tone that seems that he keeps coming back to, and I have to say, to me, as much as I hate to say it, there's a ring of truth to it. It seems to me, I don't have much sympathy, let's put it this way, for Hoiberg, because it seems that they're, as you're alluding to, they don't have the personnel for it. But even if they do get the personnel for it, it seems that what I would think that any team, despite whatever your offense, whatever type of offense you play, what you need is to really be responsible, to use a Hawks term, on defense. And I don't see Hoiberg as being necessarily a guy that looks like he's emphasizing that.
He doesn't seem to emphasize it, and it's interesting that you've got a group out there that's offensive minded and can't play defense, and then you put some others out there that might be more defensive minded, and they can't find the basket.
Isn't it interesting, Jim, that the coach that they got rid of has left such an impression that it seems that a lot of the players who are left over from his regime can't get off the page that he was on.
And a lot of them look back. A lot of them look back and say, well, when you heard Jimmy Butler's comment about, well, he's got to coach us harder.
Right.
He's got to coach us harder. And it's like, well, old dad was tough on us.
Yeah.
New dad takes it easy, and, well, I don't know if we listen to him very well.
Yeah.
Old dad, maybe some of the stuff old dad was yelling at us about actually works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I think they realized it at the time. But I think what happened there, to be fair to everybody, is that I think when you're a successful coach, which Thibodeau was, I think that when you have consistently the same message, you maybe better alter the way that you send that message. And I think maybe that was Thibodeau's undoing. He had the same message. He was consistent, but he never sort of varied the way he presented it.
He never really varied the way he presented it. That's right. Let's continue with this, but let's take a station break.
You're listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, January the 20th, the year of our Lord, 2016, with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich, Illinois. And now back to Jim and Rich.
And the frost has gotten off my mustache, John. Just to let you know, I'm warmed up now.
That's that great coffee that you're drinking.
It's that coffee. That's right. That's coffee. You know what? I mean, working in real estate offices for as number of years as that I did, I'm used to that kind of coffee. Going back to the Bulls, while we were just talking there about the fit or misfit that the team seems to be. I happen to look at my Twitter feed, and Sports Illustrated has their ratings of all the NBA teams right now, and they actually they grade the Bulls out at a B-, and their comments are interesting.
Did you say D-?
B-.
B-.
Stop me if this sounds familiar. The Bulls are a force to be reckoned with thanks to a high-performing defense and a talent-rich roster, but they are stuck a cut below. Doc, lose my place again. Now I got to go find it. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll be with you in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Now let me get back down to that article again. They rank the Brooklyn Nets as an F- too. By the way,
F-. That's bad. Now, aren't the Nets owned by the Russian? Whatever
Russian,
he is, billionaire.
Yeah, and they're paying $150 million in salary cap, luxury tax, because he's got a bunch of pieces that don't fit. But here, the Bulls are a force to be reckoned with, thanks to a high-performing defense and a talent-rich roster, but they're stuck a cut below the Cavaliers due to an underperforming offense, a host of misaligned pieces, and hit-or-miss play from an in-and-out-of-the-lineup Derrick Rose. Everything old is new again. The fundamentals are largely the same, but the faces and power dynamics are slowly shifting under first-year coach Fred Hoiberg. Joakim Noah is done for the year with a shoulder injury and potentially on his way out via trade or free agency. Jimmy Butler continues to rise so fast and so furiously that a declining Rose should be considered expendable this summer. Butler talks about wanting to be coached harder, but, it looks like he doesn't want to run Hoiberg's offense. He wants to do his own thing.
I don't know.
The front court rotation is working in some new blood, but the various candidates, Nikola Mirotic, Doug McDermott, and Bobby Portis, each are flawed enough to give Hoiberg some pause. None of these developments, not even Butler's ascendance, amounts to a true game changer. While Chicago remains on track for home court in the East, it hardly looks to have closed the gap with its Central Division rivals. Considering the long and painful history against LeBron James, Simply maintaining a consistent quality standard during a transition year won't be enough to ultimately avoid frustration. A summer filled with fireworks could easily follow. Now,
really good analysis.
Very good analysis. I can't imagine Derrick Rose being nervy enough to come to the Bulls and say he wants a max contract. Because he ain't it.
No.
He ain't it.
No. No. Well, you know what? I think
the guy in Brooklyn will give him a max contract.
Yeah, maybe.
You know.
It would. You know what though? Even if he, well, I think we talked about this on this show. Even prior to Derrick Rose ever being hurt, when he was playing his best, I just don't believe Derrick Rose is in the now. You know, they'll say he's a superstar and all of this stuff.
No.
But when you think about at least the history of the NBA that I've known, and you go back to your Bill Russells, your Wilt Chamberlains, you know, up to your Dr. J's, then your Larry Birds, Magic Johnsons, Michael Jordans, and LeBron James. Unless you have a I'm talking about a superstar, Kobe Bryant. You ain't going anywhere.
No.
Okay. The Bulls. The guy said it right. I don't know what his exact words were. The Bulls will always be a fine. They're a good team. Okay. They're going to be no more than that.
No.
Unless there's always the big if. If you really get super hot, maybe in the playoffs and really have a run, maybe you could do it. But that's a maybe. Unless you the road to the NBA is now going to go through either
Cleveland
or Oakland or San Antonio.
Yeah.
Because they have the players.
Yeah.
And we have good players. No disrespect to our players,
No.
but the way the group is assorted doesn't fit with the coach, and even the way it was assorted where it fit with the coach, it wasn't enough. So we just don't have the team, I don't think.
Yeah. And I mean, the other factor you're going to have to look at in the East now also is Toronto.
Toronto, okay.
Yeah. And over in the West, Oklahoma City can always be somebody that gets in there.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely good teams too. But I just don't see the Bulls having the dynamic player, you know, that's going to push them to the top.
I've heard the term, listening to the radios before, that they're kind of always seem to be caught in like basketball purgatory.
Yeah, they are.
You know, they're just good enough to make the playoffs, but you know you're going to try to avoid that half of the bracket where you're not going to see Cleveland early on.
Yeah,
you know, you want to finish. You want to finish 2-3. So you can be on the other side of the bracket and avoid Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you catch them in the first round, you're done quick. You're done.
Yeah.
You know.
Thanks, John.
Or catch them on that set. Not you won't catch them in the first round if you're a 4. But you know you'll be on that side of the bracket where you're going to have to run in against them early on. You'd like to maybe get them towards the end and get them towards the conference finals where maybe they're worn down, maybe they're injury prone. Maybe Kevin Love will separate his shoulder again.
You know, it's interesting, Jim. When we talked. You look at the Cavs. Okay, LeBron James. I wouldn't say probably. I despite how well Steph Curry has played, I still think LeBron's the best player in the game. You know, you got Kevin Love, you got Kyrie Irving to help do the lifting, and you know the rest. I don't know their roster up and down, but obviously, you have a strong roster all the way around. The only alternative to having a superstar is when you look at San Antonio, who over the years has had 3 guys who, if they're not superstars, they're pushing the envelope because you had Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker.
Right.
And, you know, now you add in guys like Kawhi Leonard and you bring in LaMarcus Aldridge.
And
I
mean, you even go back before then. You had David Robinson.
Yeah, David Robinson. So you've had really, really strong teams. Now, how did they do that, though? I mean, because they've been up there, too. They've been in, as you said, they're probably even a little worse than basketball purgatory because they're never getting a top pick. So, but they obviously it goes back to we've talked about this with, you name the team and you name the sport, but the teams who actually know what they're looking at talent-wise can manage to, overcome that basketball purgatory.
Yeah, because, and it gets to the point where you look at the quality of the coaching then, too. And you really can't argue with somebody like Popovich.
No, I mean, he's an excellent coach.
In San Antonio.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the best.
Yeah.
He manages his players. He manages their minutes. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's times when he can look and say, well, okay, we're playing somebody who's not going to make the playoffs here. Well, you take the night off.
Yeah.
And be rested for the most important part.
Sure.
If you're going to be secured in your playoff position, and there's no reason why San Antonio needs to sweat in their league, in their division, about making the playoffs.
Jim, have you ever watched any of these preview shows, like when they're coming up to the point where they're going to have the NBA draft, so ESPN maybe will do a draft preview show, and the experts will predict what they think the order of the draft is going to be, and of course they'll give a capsule analysis of the player, scouting report on the player, if you will. And what always amazes me, and this is where I think where an organization, say like San Antonio, is so sharp. You'll hear these scouting reports on these guys, and then invariably it'll be, well, the guy's an excellent athlete, needs to work on his mid-range jumper, or needs to work on his ball handling abilities, or needs to work on this or that. And I'm thinking, I would assume that a first-round draft choice would probably have at least a mid-range jumper. If they're a guard, they would have the ball handling skills. And so now you're telling me this is a first-round draft choice. You take a look at a guy and say, now the Bulls did a great job. When you get a guy like Jimmy Butler with the 20-something pick, okay, they actually, instead of looking at, and I'm not saying Jimmy Butler's not a really good athlete, but instead of saying, great athlete, but he's got a lot of things to work on in his game, they took a really good basketball player, and then if he had a defect in his game, they worked on it. Because I would say Jimmy Butler came to the Bulls pretty good in every area. He probably needed to work on his shot. He did. He improved it, and then he became a really, really very good player. Yeah. But I think this is where your San Antonios and other teams do such a good job. Look what the Warriors did with our favorite guy, Draymond Green.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah. This guy is he played his 4 years in college. How the heck can he be a good NBA player? Well,
it's because
watch what he did in college.
It's because he played his 4 years in college, and he played for Tom Izzo.
Exactly.
Because there's a difference, and you were, when you mentioned that, he said, well, these preview shows say, well, he's a great athlete. Do they say he's a great basketball player?
That's the problem. They're never great basketball players. They're all great athletes.
You're coming out of school with, you've played basketball in high school and you played 1 year in college. And I'm ready for the pros. No.
No, you're not.
Not always.
Well, what is the coach always, and I'm paraphrasing, but he'll say, I don't really care how many times you can do what weight on the bench press, or how fast you can run the 40, or, can you jump up on the table from a standing start or whatever. Can you play football?
Can you play football?
That's what I care about. And there's a big difference, a huge difference.
There's a huge difference between athletes and basketball players. Athletes can become basketball players. But, you're going to put some guys in there, and they're going to fumble around for a little bit. I don't know, not everyone's going to come out of that.
The other thing, it's a production-oriented business. What you run, what these guys who are the excellent athletes but not good basketball players, and then they're high draft picks, so they're going to a bad team. What they run into, basically, is a coach and a management team that needs you to be good right now. And you're probably not good right now. So now you fall by the wayside because we're only interested in guys who can help us now. You can't help us now. Your career is shot.
Thanks for playing.
Thanks for a lot.
Yeah, thanks for
yeah.
Thanks for stopping by. You've played your 3 years. Good luck to you.
Exactly. That's what happens.
Good
That's
luck
what
to
happens.
you. Enjoy your time over in Europe.
Right. We don't have any time to develop you. We
No,
need you to be
no.
ready.
And I was honestly surprised that the NBA took as long as they did for their developmental league to really set up a true farm system to put some of these guys out there that actually need the work. I mean, we had the old Continental Basketball League and the old ABA, or when they tried to revive the ABA after Isaiah Thomas ran, what was it, the Continental Basketball League in the bankruptcy.
Right.
They had to have truly a developmental league for some of these guys. And some of them, maybe that's where your second-round draft picks are. That's where all your free agents wind up.
Well, there's another story in itself, Jim. I'm not sure that I've seen a few of the NBA DL games. They'll show them on TV on occasion.
Hey, next year we're going to have a team out in Hoffman Estates.
Hoffman Estates. But I'm not really sure that, that the development league is actually developing anything, because I think what you really have is a bunch of guys who start off not understanding what they're supposed to do. That's why they're in the league. And depending, again, on who is running the team, they, if that coach is just, well, you know what, I got a bunch of guys who are all, I'll just use the term egomaniacs, okay? They think their only way back in the NBA is to put up 40 points if they can in the night. This is the reason they're not in the NBA, and it's the reason they're never going to get
and the
into
reason
the
they're
NBA.
never going to be there.
And the NBA DL ends up to be like an AAU league or something, where everybody's sort of just trying to show their skills, and that's not really what the NBA guys are probably looking for. They're looking for a guy who knows how to play basketball.
Yeah, and I think that'll be interesting. I'm actually kind of looking forward to then when that team starts to actually going out and watching one of their games to see the quality or lack of the same in their play.
It would be interesting when they had, I think, the league that you were talking about that came after the CBL folded. I think that I want to say they had a team that played at the Horizon for a while.
Yeah, they did. In fact,
Ronnie Fields, I think, was
Ronnie
on the
Fields.
team.
Joey Meyer was the head coach.
Joey Meyer was the coach, and I can't really say, but because I didn't really stop in and see the games. Almost nobody stopped in to see the games.
I saw one or two of them.
But I can't imagine the way this whole thing is constituted that it can be all that beneficial to anybody.
It as I watched it, if I remember right, it was kind of like a high-scoring YMCA game.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they turn into.
That's really what it turned into, and I was a little surprised. Watching it.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see what happens. Hey, we got some football coming up this weekend.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
We got some football. It's interesting as I look at Mondays sometimes and Tuesdays sometimes. Line has moved on New England and Denver from 3.5 down to 3, and the
Patriots are favored by 3.
Patriots are favored by 3, and Carolina and Arizona are still at 3. Interesting on Carolina and Arizona, I believe this is the first time in a championship game that you have two number one draft picks, 2 first-round draft picks, and also former Heisman Trophy winners facing each other.
Carson Palmer and Cam Newton are both Heisman Trophy winners?
I remember Cam Newton and Carson Palmer.
Okay.
USC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
USC.
I think so this is the first time in a championship game.
Okay. You know what, Jim? Did you see? I didn't see the first game on Sunday, but I did see the end of the second game, and I thought it was really very. I enjoyed it they interviewed Peyton Manning right after the game, and of course, the sideline reporter has to bring this up, and Manning acknowledged, I know this question is coming, but the matchup between him and Tom Brady, but he was very classy with his answer, and I could see where, especially the fact that everybody will say he's whatever his record is against Brady, even though I personally wouldn't look at it that way, saying it's Brady versus Manning. It's the whatever team Manning's on versus whatever team Brady's on.
Yeah.
And the best team wins. I don't know that it's necessarily means that the guy at quarterback who played the best that game wins. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Brady or touting Manning, but very classy. He handled it very well, and But I have to think to myself, he's got to be sick of listening to this, because Brady's teams have had the better of it with Manning's teams. But I would say overall, when you look at the Patriots, most of it was the Patriots and the Colts. The Patriots were always the better team.
Yeah, they really were. And this is an interesting one. I mean, when you're getting down to what? You're getting down to a 3-point game. Essentially, you're saying, no, the game's at Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The game's at Denver.
The game's at Denver. That's right. I was thinking
Yeah.
you're getting down to an even game, but no, you're not. The game's at Denver.
Well, did you see any of the Patriots Chiefs game?
No, I didn't get to see any of it. We were doing stuff, and I kind of got occupied doing other things.
I think the one thing, and I'm not saying the Patriots will win, lose, or whatever, but what I think, again, what I saw in that game that tells me why the Patriots seem to always be able to be up there is, they go in with a banged-up offensive line. That's a question mark. And the Chiefs go in with a really very good defense. And it was the Patriots' game plan, basically, that made the difference. I mean, he threw a lot of quick, I don't know if you would even call them screens. It reminded me a little bit of when Gary Crowton first came to the Bears as the OC. And they did a lot of that.
That wacky offense they had.
But it was effective because he had to get. He really wasn't going to have time to throw the ball down the field much.
No,
they were a concern with the rush, and they game planned for it. And now, what'll be interesting to see in Denver is they're going to probably. Obviously, they'll have the same situation. I don't think their offensive line is going to be any less banged up. Denver's got an excellent defense. I'm sure you won't see the same thing though. They'll game plan for it and have something ready for it, but you're not going to see the same thing that they worked with that worked for them against the Chiefs. You're not going to see them do the same thing against the Broncos, and I think that's why they are always so effective. Their game planning seems to be able to rise to the occasion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It should be an interesting game. Carolina and Arizona. I got to admit, I got to pull. I'm really pulling for Carolina just so Chico can have a shot at a Super Bowl.
Actually, I'm not a big Cam Newton fan. Cam Newton is going to have to win 2 more games to make me any kind of a believer at all. And I think the thing, what really is interesting, again, because, and I'll say it right out, I think because Cam Newton is a black quarterback, and the media wants that particular situation to succeed, but when I haven't seen Carolina play that much, but Cam Newton's had a really good year. But what I notice is, like in the game on Sunday, who's their running back that just came back from injury? I can't think of who it is.
I just went blank on his name. I was about to say his name, too.
But at any rate, he had a very good game.
He had a good day.
Their defense had a really good day.
Newton
had a good day, but
nothing spectacular.
Nothing spectacular.
You got a good defensive ball club,
right?
And what else would you expect with a guy like Rivera?
Yeah,
as your head coach.
Well, I would say that linebacker combo. And I don't even know who. I don't know if they're running a 3-4, 4-3. It doesn't matter. But Kuechly and Davis are 2 of the best linebackers in the league, and playing together, they make a very effective. They make Carolina's defense very effective. I wonder how our buddy, the guy that we had with the Bears that went to the Panthers,
Jared Allen?
Jared Allen.
He's out. He broke his foot.
Oh, he broke his foot?
Yeah, I think that's what I heard today.
Okay.
I think he's out. I heard it's a foot injury. I think it was a broken foot.
Okay.
So he's done.
Okay. So he's done.
I heard that on the way over here.
Okay. But, I mean, you know what? He landed on a nice team. If you're going to buy, not too many guys, especially in football.
Yeah.
Do you bounce to a contending team in the middle of the season?
In the middle of the season, wind up with a contender and might have a shot at,
Yeah.
getting a cut of some Super Bowl money at
I
least.
wonder, the other guy, John, the linebacker that we sent to the Patriots. I wonder, has he
Bostic?
been active at all?
Bostic?
Bostic. Has he been playing for them at all?
Good question. Don't even know. We'd have to look at the roster and see.
And then I noticed in the in one who was this guy playing? He was playing for the Cardinals, I think. I'm looking at the game, and there's a linebacker there, Minter. And I'm thinking of Barry
Minter.
And I'm thinking, nah,
No,
can't be.
he's too
long gone.
He's long gone. That's the
Yeah.
same thing I thought when I saw that.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because we were up here all weekend and we were doing stuff around Norwich, and actually Sunday afternoon we wound up spending some time over at Triton at the CERN Space Center for their monthly shows. One of the shows, a good show, a laser show with music featuring the music of Queen.
Oh,
A lot of fun to watch. But came back and I'm doing some stuff and I just had my Twitter feed open and I look and somebody said, "Oh my God, it was 4th and 21 and Aaron Rodgers just heaved the ball 61 yards."
That was unbelievable.
And I turned it on. As soon as I saw that, I went and turned the TV on just as Larry Fitzgerald scored.
Yeah, okay.
and then I had to sit there and watch all the highlights and I went, boy, that was a hell of a game.
I'll tell you, my hat's off to the Packers. They made it a great game. They're missing. I mean, they have no wide receivers to speak of that. I mean, that have actually been playing.
No.
And John Janis, the guy who made both of those catches, I want to say they said this year he had 2 catches and last year he had 2 catches. So he's probably a special teams guy.
Yeah.
And that catch in the end zone was a great catch and huge. You know what though? It just shows you these are professionals, and I think one of the mistakes that coaches can make is you start to pigeonhole a guy and say, well, he's only a special team guy. That's what he. You know what? If he's good enough to be a special team guy, maybe he's good enough to catch a pass or play linebacker. Or whatever the case may be.
We talked this year about the performance that Cutler put on with some of these receivers that were the who's who of who's he.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's possible.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
It's possible. I saw something today that Mike McCarthy said that Eddie Lacy needs to lose weight in the offseason.
Oh, is that why they had so many problems? Or
he
was having some problems.
That he
with
was
McCarthy?
having some problems. That he says his problem was he was too fat.
And
he said it was something about not having a good season. Good off season. That's a phone. The phone rang. Was that him calling for Rich?
Yeah,
I just wanted to check. I heard the phone ring, John. Oh, okay.
I have to say,
might have been for Rich.
The Packers, I think, do an outstanding job with identifying talent and that type of thing. But I have to tell you, in a lot of the games I've seen, I'm not so sure that their game coaching is so excellent.
I don't know.
I'm really,
I have to pay attention to that on Sunday.
I'm thinking back to last year's NFC Championship game with Seattle, where they totally screwed it up.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure that there wasn't some real clunkers in there on this past weekend as well. I'm starting to wonder just how good of. I'm not going to put it all on McCarthy, but I'm just saying, I'm not so sure that their game coaching is as good as it could be.
We'll have to see. One other thing on mine, and we're coming up on top, so we'll go a little bit over here. John doesn't care. Do you care, John?
No.
Oh, that's good.
I just have a question to ask. What's going to happen with the Packers now? Are they done or are they still playing yet?
Done.
No, they're done.
Done.
So they're on vacation now.
They're on vacation.
Done. It's safe to go across the line now. It's safe to cross the cheddar curtain now.
Well, to be honest with you, and my sister and I, we have a little difference of opinions, but, the Bears haven't done a darn thing in the last several years. And it's
9 years in a row. 9 years they've missed the playoffs.
And it's nice to see at least somebody from this area that advanced as well as the Packers did.
No. No.
Huh?
No.
Okay.
No. Although, I mean,
me.
it really doesn't bother me either. I mean, I was thinking back when we were in high school, and they lifted the blackout rule on home games if the games are sold out a certain number of hours prior to there, and we all kind of looked at each other and went, because what would happen before is if the Bears played at home and they didn't sell out, invariably we'd get the Packer games.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the days of the Lombardi.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, okay, now we'll get to watch the Bears every week. And we're all like, oh.
Yeah.
I guess we can't watch the Packers now.
Well,
and I think back, too, watching that, my dad was just a huge Bart Starr fan. He just thought Bart Starr was sainted.
Against me out.
Yeah. And then having to watch the Bears, it was like, oh.
I've always said, at least to myself, when the Cubs play the Cardinals, that's a big rivalry, the Bears and the Packers. But when those teams are not playing us, it's not like I feel a lot of people they hate the Packers, they hate the Cardinals. I don't feel that way. They've always been really good, for the most part, been very good teams. Yeah, and I appreciate what they do.
You appreciate the quality of the play.
For me, when I watched the game last Saturday night, I didn't want to see. I hate to say it this way. You don't want to see anybody lose because I see, these guys want to advance. You don't have that many chances to get to the championship game. And, I hate to see anybody lose that game. So, you know what? And I keep going back and forth. I might be rooting for the Cardinals for part of the game. Yeah. Then something will happen. I'll root for the Packers for part of the game.
You enjoy the quality of what you see. We rail about the meatballs that are out there and feel that they have their audience on social media now. That somebody I know said, he posted after the last Bear game. He said, "Well, we lost to the Kitties, but at least it wasn't to those goat humpers from up north."
Who said this now?
A meatball Bear fan.
Okay.
Yeah, at least it wasn't from those goat humpers up north.
Yeah.
Come on. You're 60 years old. Get over it.
Yeah, that's true.
Geez.
You know what I always when it comes right down to it, I don't know anybody on the Bears. I don't know anybody on the Packers personally. I don't even know if the Bears have any like homegrown guys. They may have a they do. They have the one kid from St. Joseph's, Meredith, the wide receiver.
Right.
But I don't know if people realize this, but the guy who is, and he's been a stalwart on their line for half a dozen years, Brian Balaga, is not a Chicago guy, but an Illinois guy. He comes from one of the northwest suburbs. And so I guess in terms of, when you try to find reasons to root, there's a guy who's actually let's just put it this way, Chicago area guy.
He's a local
who's
guy.
a regular, he's a local guy playing for the Packers.
Sure.
So so I'll tell you what, there's local people that are rooting for that guy because they're his family, his friends, and whatever. So
yeah,
all of this stuff is. If I see somebody with a Packers jersey or a Cardinals hat or something on, I'm not gonna, I'm not going to say anything. That's your your team. That's your team.
I have a good friend of mine was married to who was married to a guy who, and he was a diehard Packer fan. And Dave passed away a number of years ago. And Barb, every time she watches a Bears-Packer game, first half is she puts Dave's old Packer jersey on, watches that. Then she watches the Bear game, and then she puts her Bears jersey on and watches that. And Dave was cremated, and the ashes are in the urn in the dining room, and she goes and puts Dave's old Packer hat on top of the urn. So that's her celebration always.
Yeah.
That's her celebration. There's some, we rail against the meatballs, but when I read stuff like that guy post, I'm going, come on, dude. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. Hey, there was one other thing. There's so many things we didn't get up to. I found the ultimate baseball geek book.
Uh-oh, what is it?
It's the Encyclopedia of Baseball Statistics and all the formulas in here.
Oh, my God.
You know, and bullpens, things in there. I thought, how in God's name could you even measure this? And why do you want to know? One of these days, when I have some time, I'm going to spend like months at my computer and analyze everything and try to determine if anything is meaningful.
Well, I'm glad you're the one who's going to do that.
Yay. Jeez. I'll probably last about 20 minutes and go. And one other thing, baseball-wise, Justin Upton, 6 years, $132 million.
Oh, who did he sign?
Tigers.
The Tigers.
You realize the Tigers, some games this coming season are going to have 8 right-handed hitters?
8 right-handed hitters?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't bother me.
No.
As long as they could hit.
If they can hit, and if they can hit right-handed pitching, God bless.
Yeah, I mean that
Victor Martinez is the switch hitter. You got to keep him in there.
Jim, you know what? I don't want to keep this going any further, but before I got here, I was sort of looking at some stats from some older players and then from some newer players, just their overall career numbers, wins and losses, batting average, home runs, stuff like that. It's interesting. You'll see a guy who maybe had was the guy? Okay, one of the guys I was looking at was Jerry Staley. Okay, Jerry Staley. I always thought, he was a relief pitcher with the Sox in the 59
pennant season.
Man, there is a guy.
Cincinnati too.
He started out with St. Louis. He
St.
played
Louis,
with
that was
several
it.
teams.
St. Louis.
Obviously, he was a starter because he had at least one season when he won 19. I think he had another when he won 18. I didn't realize that he had been that effective as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
But you're thinking to yourself, another guy I looked at was Ray Jablonski, who's a local guy, started out with the Cardinals and started out really good, and then all of a sudden fell off the map. And there's a lot of guys that are in that category where they had 1 or 2 outstanding years and then boom. Or you'll see a guy like Ted Kluszewski went from maybe 3 consecutive years with 40-some homers and a lot of RBIs, dropped down then into maybe the 20s, and then went totally off the cliff to where he had like 6 homers following this. And you're thinking, what the heck happened? Did guys get injured? Is that why they couldn't perform anymore? Pitchers, a lot of pitchers who you see them start out good or they have an outstanding season, all of a sudden they fall off the edge of the earth. And you're thinking, as much as I detest the pitch count and whatnot, and you can point to the guys, look at Warren Spahn and Juan Marichal, they pitched 17 innings or 16 innings, threw 200 pitches and went out and made their next start, never had a sore arm. But I'm thinking to myself, there was probably a lot of guys who went out, were overpitched, had good years, but the next year they were shot.
They were shot.
And never came back.
Yeah.
So just interesting to look at some of these things.
Think about Ernie Broglio, and all of a sudden that was it.
Yeah. So
one of the worst deals, and everybody in St. Louis said, "How could you give up on Broglio?"
Yeah. So anyway,
and you ran out of things. All right,
just a thought, but
it's
just a random thought. I don't want to get into the whole
random
thing.
Thoughts.
When you brought up stats, I made me think of that.
Yeah, so many things we don't have time to get into because I think we're running out of things to talk about, at least for today. So let's wrap it up. John, wake up! Time to wrap it up. Okay, just checking. All right. We're going to wrap it up.
We'll see you tonight.
Yeah, we're going to, it's Tuesday as we're doing this, so we're going to do a basketball game tonight, a girls' game. Hopefully tomorrow there'll be a win.
Yeah,
we'll
be
see.
Nice.
We'll see. But hopefully we have a good game tonight. In the meantime, we're going to get on out of here, and thanks for listening. We'll catch you again in a couple of weeks. Until that time, we are Taillights.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, January the 20th, the year of our Lord, 2016, on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with the WRHS sports announcers Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John DeVita, and special thanks to radio station manager Kevin Zeflik of WRHS-FM Norwich and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Seconda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, January the 19th, the year 2016. Until next time, please be safe and thanks for listening. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM, Norwich, Illinois, a Ridgewood Community High School radio station.